Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond. My name is Larry Kruger, and it is my honor to serve on your board of directors. For those of you who are new to us and members and friends who are turning in from near and far, welcome. We are so grateful to be able to connect with you. We are a community of many faith journeys and beliefs committed to being deliberately diverse and fully inclusive. We want you to know that whoever you are, you belong here. We are a community that is resilient and committed to healing, does the work that needs to be done, and commits to maintaining and establishing our relationships. Let us continue to stand together on the side of love. For more information, please visit our website at richmonduu.org, subscribe to our YouTube channel to view past services, and log into the services early to catch the preceding announcements. Thank you for being with us today. May this be a comforting, centering, and restorative moment for you. Welcome.
How many principles does it take to build a just world, an anti-violent world, an anti-oppressive world, an anti-racist world? When I joined the anti-racist group to talk about what it means to be anti-racist and to have a commitment to anti-racism as a Unitarian Universalist and a Unitarian Universalist at First UU, what I didn't expect was that our conversation would lead us directly to the principles as the foundation by which we made a determination around who we are, as well as who we want to be.
Well, I always thought from the very beginning that the principles are what draw us together. And as I was saying in the hallway, I tend to take those words literally. So I've read them over and over again. And when I get to the words, I think they mean what they say. And I look them up and go for the definitions. And so when I think about those 7 principles, if we are living them, that I think it makes us inherently anti-racist. And so that's why that's why I just always connected those things together.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a roadmap on how we should live. And I think we should pay more attention to that. As I am, that would be
It's true. That's one of the reasons I joined the UU Church, because of the principles. To me, it totally meant interdependent of everybody. Nobody was exclusive. And there was no difference of color, religion. Everybody was of one. I didn't see any difference. So the principles of what you mean.
Me too. And one of the things that strikes me is how little attention we pay to the principles, although we claim them as central, right? And so I think somebody mentioned, and you mentioned, it'd be nice to know what they are. It'd be nice to know what they are. It would be nice to know how that works for us. It would be nice for us to be able to say to one another positively that, wow, you look at you acting like a Unitarian Universalist. Or, on the other hand, to hold one another accountable when we're not. And it gives us some tools to do that. But the tools have to be in my hand, right? They can't be like back at the office.
The religious education really focuses on the principles. I've taught 3rd graders and middle schoolers and high schoolers, and almost every lesson or session that we had, whatever it was we were talking about, the teacher would say, well, okay, well, how does this relate, or what principle are we talking about here? And there was a lot of study of the principles. I think that the principles are more ingrained in the children. They can, recite them by rote, or at least the way that they're phrased for children, much more than adults can, including myself.
So maybe we need to bring some religious education upstairs.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I'm all for bringing more religion into our services, our education, our adult education, because I think that a lot of people join and they go through pathways, but they don't have a really firm grounding in the principles and the theology behind the principles. And I'm saying theology not in terms of the supreme being, but just in terms of the religious outlook.
So we decided to bring religious education upstairs. We invited each other to reflect on the principles that spoke to us and to reflect on the ones that challenged us. We began a conversation about our covenant, as well as how we live our principles or struggle with each other in those principles within the container of our covenant. We invite you into that conversation now as we reflect in worship, and we invite you to join us after worship for our coffee hour, where we will open up to a more communal conversation with each one of you. Welcome to a time of worship.
So I want to just talk a little bit about what leads into principles for us and what the significance of that is for me. In our association, the principles start with we, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote a set of principles and a set of documents that we hold as sacred. And so fundamental to the principles is the idea that we do these things, we enact these things, we embody these things in community and in relationship. And that to me is the importance of covenanting around these things. And so when we gather together, we have to bear in mind that it's the relationships that lend the principles value, that our mutual liberation is mutual, that it's tied up in collaborative and mutual action, that individually we may not be able to accomplish much, we might not be able to discover much, but together we can do great things. And one of the things we can do as Unitarian Universalists collectively is embody a set of principles in the world. And these principles define relationships in the association between congregations. It defines our relationship as a congregation with other congregations in a region and in a cluster. And it also defines and helps define relationships that we have amongst each other here within this community. And hopefully that feeds into relationships that we have outside of this community and makes them more valuable and more just and more equitable. And so I think the idea of covenant, the idea of this sacred agreement that we make is foundational to the impact that our principles can have.
This is our covenant. We, the members of First Unitarian Church of Richmond, in support of our community, promise to celebrate our differences,
honor the UU principles,
be accountable for our words and actions,
listen with openness and compassion,
invite and welcome all,
commit our time, talents, and financial resources,
expect the best of each other and ourselves.
When our
how does the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism relate to anti-racism and anti-oppression work? Our principles serve as the values that guide us on our faith journey. Among the principles that we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote is Principle 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Free and responsible search for truth and meaning. There's a lot to unpack in that simple statement. Some important, ponderous words that have multiple meanings. I believe that the fourth principle can be read to be entirely consistent with and even demanding of efforts toward anti-racism and anti-oppression. So what is meant by free in this context? I'm going to go through each of the words and try to unpack them a little bit more. What is meant by free in this context? We often hear it said that Unitarian Universalism, you can just believe whatever you want. But that isn't exactly correct, is it? As UUs, we agree to uphold basic shared principles, which include everyone's inherent worth and dignity, the right of conscience, justice, equity, compassion. So for example, a belief that some humans are superior to others based on race, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender expression would not be consistent with these principles. So don't our principles bind our freedom of belief somewhat? A more daunting query is, what is truth? There are probably as many opinions about what truth means as there are members and friends of First UU. Is truth just objective scientific reality, only that which is demonstrable by mathematical formula or in reproducible laboratory experiments? Does truth refer only to our personal spiritual beliefs and convictions about what happens after death or whether there's a higher power? Or can it also refer to stories, narratives, lived experiences, not only our own, but those of others? Reverend Paige Getty says that the fourth principle calls us not to be isolated and self-centered, believing that our single perspective trumps all others, but rather to be humble, to be open to the great mysteries of truth and meaning that life offers. And those mysteries may speak to us through our own intuition and experience, but also through tradition, community, conflict, nature, and relationships. And what is meant by search? In our faith, we are not content to simply receive dogma from the pulpit or a book. We're encouraged to think critically. Noted UU theologian James Luther Adams said that revelation is not sealed, but is continuous, meaning, as Reverend Getty puts it, mindful people will, in every age, gain new insights. The more we listen, the deeper we delve critically into the received wisdom, the more we realize that there are other truths than simply what we choose to believe. What is meant by responsible? It could refer to being the cause of something. So we could debate for hours whether people living in 2021 are responsible for the racist systems and institutions that exist today. Certainly some of our ancestors were. But what do we do with this responsibility for creation and perpetuation? Merely shrug and say it's not our fault, that's just the way things are? Being responsible also means having an obligation or a duty. The UU faith relies on members being accountable, keeping promises, and honoring our commitments because we're not part of a dogma that we must believe in. So we owe it to ourselves and to our neighbors to go deep, to not turn away from uncomfortable truths that we've become aware of in our search, uncomfortable truths that we found by listening and being open to different perspectives and stories. We owe it to ourselves and our neighbors to confront these truths, to name them, to oppose them in ourselves, in our families, our systems, our institutions. That's why exercises in speaking out against racial micro and macro aggressions is such an important component of the Living the Pledge program. And finally, what is meant by meaning? When we attempt to determine something's meaning, we set out to define it and to define its significance. But meaning also refers to intent or purpose. I think in this context, meaning is what we commit to doing with the truths that we found on our search. And what better purpose can we have than to heal the essential wounds of this country's racist origins and to strive for justice for all? The fourth UU principle encourages us, no, it urges us, it demands of us as part of our individual and collective faith journeys to name and oppose racism and all forms of oppression as we encounter them and understand them.
Hi, I'd like to tell you that I want to reflect on the seventh principle, the interdependent web of life in all things. This is one of my favorite principles of the Unitarian traditions and principles. This is what attracted me to Unitarian Universalism. It reminds me of what I am. I am earth-based philosophies in spirituality, and it is totally what I believe. And how I look at this is through, if you can imagine Da Vinci's drawing of man, he's spread like the 5 points of the pentacle within a circle. And I have the tentacle right here. So imagine man in the center. This is man. And in the east, which is where we rise every morning, in most traditions, this is what we believe in. And east represents the element of air, which is our breath. We can't live without it. All creatures cannot live without it. It resembles and identifies with self, individuality. It is our unique manifestation within ourselves. It encompasses our wisdom of knowing how to use our knowledge and what we're going to do with it to help us grow. So that is our east part of our body. Then we go to sex. And south is the element of fire. It is part of our passions. It is self-identity. It is the passion and the force of emotion that gives color and depth and vitality to life, all life. It gives us knowledge that can be taught. It is a knowing what to say, and it's a consumption of joining of passion, of love and spirit, and of all creation. And then we go to west, the other part of man. The element is water. This introduces us to pride and encourages us to create and to share and to grow with our dreams and to enjoy the rightfulness of the fruits of our achievements. It is the law of all natural things. It's magical creations of functions within natural law and of time of advancing age and reflection and integration and wisdom. And now we go to man, to north. The element is here, which is the other part of our arm now. We go all the way up our body. It is the direction of mystery. It's also the direction of stabilization. It's the earth. This is part of our 5 points of the life force that flows through all of us and all of creation. We are connected to everything and everyone on this earth. It is the power of creation of courage and creation of wholeness for all of life's being. And then the last part is spirit. It is love. It is birth. It is death. It is the bridge between this world and the other worlds. It is our faith. We, as a people, are here. It is Gaia. It is Father Sky. It is all of us all around. We are here as one whole, not just the human race, but all of everything. And this, to me, is the interdependent web of all life that we are supposed to be working together.
Okay, so I want to share my reflection about the third principle. It says acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. And I really had to give this a lot of thought. And in order to really decide what it meant for me, I had to take it in two pieces. So the first part of it, acceptance of one another. I wanted to kind of wrap my mind around what are we saying when we say acceptance of one another. So of course I did what I do. I went right to the dictionary to see what the dictionary said about it. And then I got three different definitions, all of which I found interesting. So the first one is the action or process of being received as adequate or suitable, typically to be admitted into a group. Yeah. And the sentence that they gave as an example is, you must wait for acceptance into the club. And I'm going to come back to that. The second definition says agreement or belief in an idea, opinion, or explanation. Example, acceptance of the teaching of the church. And the third was willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. So, yeah, right. So I put those things together. And this is what, when I think about belonging to First UU, when I think about why I came to this congregation, belonging was one of the reasons to belong to this community, this beloved community. And I realized that this principle calls us to create a space for me to be received. One of the synonyms is welcome, welcoming, a favorable reception, embracing. So an expectation then, if we're living this principle, is that people who come into this community are going to get acceptance. That is, being received as adequate and suitable, right? Meaning we don't have to be any more than what we are in order to be here. The second part of it is the acceptance of the teachings of the church. And for me, that means we've got these principles. They are very dear to me. They are the basis and the foundation on which I sort of connect as a UU, that they mean a lot to me. And so that's my acceptance, since, the Christian church says that you have to believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior in order to belong, right? And we don't have a direct statement of what we have to do in order to belong, but this principle suggests that we will accept the teachings of the church. And then the third, I love this one, the willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. And so this is the thing about acceptance that I think gets missed. And that is, sometimes it's just tolerating. It's not liking, it's not having people be like you. Sometimes you just have to tolerate what other people bring and let that just be. And I see that we society and we American people have gotten to the place where tolerance has become a very difficult thing for us. And just recognizing that, people have real different opinions, real different points of view. And sometimes being in community means just tolerating and not having to make them think of it any different way. So that's really big for me. So that's acceptance as the part of the principle. The second part was a little bit harder for me to discern, and that says the encouragement to spiritual growth within our congregation. So like the first thing is, I don't know what spiritual growth is, right? I don't know what that looks like. And I'm a layperson. So how does that apply to me? So again, I went looking, I went searching, and Wikipedia gave a definition. It says spirituality in a narrow sense concerns itself with matters of the spirit. The spiritual involving, as it may, perceived external truths regarding humankind's ultimate nature, often contrasts with the temporal, with the material, or with the worldly. So what we're doing with the idea of spirituality is saying, we exist in a very human world as human beings, but there is a realm beyond that, that is our spirit, that has a completely different nature to it. It's felt, it's not seen, it's emotional, not physical. And so what does it mean about, then spiritual growth? And they go further to say spirituality is a sense of connection, A sense of connection forms a central defining characteristic of spirituality. Connection to something greater than oneself, which includes emotional experience of religious awe and reverence. Now, when I think about why, you ask me why I go to church, right? What am I looking for? That question came up and I couldn't really answer it at the time. But this says like, yes, I want to experience religious awe and reverence. I want to be in a place that feels holy when I come into it. And so that kind of, and that feeling, that atmosphere allows me to connect into the spirit, because again, I'm in a place that feels like the spirit, rather than my mind and my body, is sort of activated. It gets activated. So I'm looking for that emotional experience in church. And then, and spiritual growth. One can define personal spiritual growth as a way to integrate spirituality to a higher degree in our daily lives. So that's what it is. We're looking for this connection, something greater than ourselves, and we want to integrate that into our daily lives. So, and finally, it's just the basic right of existence, the basic rights of existence, the equal right of all beings to be on earth, to develop and carry out their task, must be so strongly internalized that in every situation we automatically act according to these rights without having to think about it. We refer to this ability in the following as awareness or consciousness. Spiritual growth means developing this ability further. Right. And so I love that because, again, I'm looking for not just what the principle says and what it means, but I ask myself, how do I live this? What does it look like? What am I looking for? And there are a lot of answers in here for me. It also answers for me when I come into this beloved community. I want that spirit of awe. I want to find the reverence in this space at that time. It's not just about the connection with the people, although the connection with the people is important. And so then I ask myself, how do I live into this principle? So I believe that building beloved community is a spiritual practice, and that becoming more accepting and internalizing everyone's basic rights of existence is how I can live the principle. I think our worship services should provide the opportunity to have that emotional experience of religious awe and reverence that is characteristic of spirituality. And so those are my thoughts, those are my hopes. This is what the principle brings up for me. And, we talked about how does this make us more anti-racist? Well, think about this, right? Acceptance, tolerance, spiritual growth, supporting each other's spiritual growth, meaning bigger than ourselves, the world is bigger than ourselves, our connectedness, all of that in its inherent definition is anti-racist. And so that's what I think.
I chose to reflect on the eighth principle because for me, it's a principle that really calls us to act. I was recently struck by an article that Rob Corcoran, a former Richmonder, wrote where he talked about the challenge of really achieving racial equity. And one of the things that he said, he's since moved to Austin, Texas. And he said that while Austin, Texas is known as a liberal city, one of its biggest challenges is that it believes its own PR. And I was struck with the question about us as UUs, and do we sometimes believe our own PR? And for me, the eighth principle is such a clear articulation of what we have to do together, what we have to commit to as a community and in community. So where often the work that we do around anti-racism and really the work we do around the other principles can sometimes be very much an individual endeavor. I feel like the 8th principle really expresses very clearly that this is something that we have to work on as a community with each other. For those who may not be aware, in 2018, this congregation adopted the 8th principle. And so it's relatively new to us. We do still have the opportunity to really learn to live it. But the 8th principle talks about beloved community, a concept that we often talk about, fight for, study, and what I believe the 8th principle calls us to do is embody it. And I know that, like many of you, I dream of the day when people walk into our community and instead of encountering a group of people who talk about, fight for, and study beloved community, that they actually walk in and experience beloved community.
Good morning. I'm Jim Armstrong with the Share the Plate Committee, and I'm pleased to announce that the recipient for Share the Plate for the months of July and August will be Side by Side. Founded in 1991 as the Richmond Organization for Sexual Minority Youth, Side by Side has taken on a number of projects over the years. In particular, they founded an alternative prom, and our church has acted as a host for that on several occasions, and many of our members have helped staff the prom over the years. Most recently, Side by Side has collaborated in founding Pride Place, temporary housing and service support for young people at the Virginia School for Boys and Girls. We're delighted to deepen our partnership with Side by Side and are deeply grateful for your generosity over the next 2 months that will help support their work. Thank you very much.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. voices free. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. Ooh, 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 ooh. This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Now we conclude with our covenant. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Richmond, in support of our community, promise to celebrate our differences,
Honor the UU principles.
be accountable for our words and actions,
Listen with openness and compassion.
invite and welcome all,
Commit our time, talents, and financial resources.
expect the best of each other and ourselves.
One of the things that occurred to me from being in conversation with this group over the past couple of weeks is that the principles have always been out there somewhere for me, sort of floating and yeah, with the principles, yada, yada, yada. And from talking with folks in this group, I've become aware of how important the principles are. Not only that, but how important it is for to live, to be able to have, I have to have community in order to practice the principles. You know, the principles in and of themselves, I mean, I can't do the principles by myself. I mean, I've been at UU for 40 years. And to be really honest with you, this is the first time that the principles I feel like have had a bite for me. And now, I mean, this is the honest to God's truth. And the reason they have a bite is because I'm in community with other people talking about the principles. I'm not in a service. I'm not having somebody talk at me about them. And I think that also because of a feeling about anti-racism and the connection to anti-racism and the connection between the principles and anti-racism is not something I came upon by myself. This is something that I came upon because of what happened in this group. And I am just grateful for that. And I can't believe that at the age I'm at, you know, this is still new. I mean, these are still new things for me. So I can't say how much. It's not just the principles, but it is living the principles in community that's essential.
And you know, that made me really think about it, because I had a couple of aha moments when I was getting ready for this. I'm going to go back to what you just said. The principles are relational, and they're about how we are in relationship with each other, which is why you have to have a community. Why talking about them with people and really reflecting against other people, or
sort of how does this look, right? Am I doing it right? But you can't do that in isolation. It's a relational spiritual exercise or doing. And I want to say to those of you who told me on the last call that it was hard, and I was like, yeah, really. Well, it's really funny because when I was looking at the third principle and asking myself, how do you do this? I realized that this is hard. So that's helpful, you guys.
Okay, I've answered that question 1,000 times.
And hard, not because I don't think we can do it. Yeah. I think what I learned, like the third principle talks about acceptance, and on the surface, that sounds like you can just go do that. But you've got to, like, there was one part of it that said tolerance. Like sometimes you just got to tolerate right people, and you just got to tolerate what they do, and that is acceptance, right? And then, so I thought, they were so right.
Well, I think it just speaks to the depth that's in each of those concepts. And I think, as you use, sometimes we are seekers and we want to kind of explore more and learn more. And it's hard to go back and just look at what's there. But, you all have just talked about how much more is there when we do go back in community and maybe in relation to things that we really care about, like anti-racism.
One of the things that strikes me in this discussion is, so if I'm paying attention to the principles and the relationships that underlie them, I'm going to be anti-racist and anti-oppressive, right? Yeah. That's the only alternative there is in that context. And we know that the association and Unitarian Universalism and individual churches have wrestled with that. And so it's like one of the things that occurred to me is one of the things behind the movement for an eighth principle is to say, we understand that being good at this means we are that thing, okay? And we've had 50 years of not doing so well at it. So let's say it out loud now and see if that helps. Helps us be more Unitarian Universalist in our behaviors and our relationships.
Well, that would help, saying it out loud and talking amongst each other about the principles. It's one thing to practice the principles, but unless you talk about it and dig deeper into their meaning, it's hard to practice them.
And I think that's where, like we talk about having an RE for adults, and I think we should do an RE for the principles. I really do. It's like we used to have our Wednesday night adult RE type classes with the minister or minister classes, but I don't think it would hurt to do a service a month on a principle.
It is indeed hard to practice our principles alone. So we invite you to join us for coffee hour, where we may learn, engage, and practice together. I'll see you in coffee hour.
Touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate we make, a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all.